enter your inner room means leave behind all the turmoil of the world insofar as it affects you, temporarily. 20 minutes or a half hour is what we suggest. Jesus doesn't set a time, he leaves that to our good judgment. Then he says, close the door, which is interpreted to mean turn off the interior dialogue. That is to say, the constant conversation we have with ourselves about people and events entering and leaving our lives, and our emotional reactions to them, our concerns, often negative about the past, and our anxieties, often painful and worrisome about the future. So, contemplative prayer, then, is the movement to a deeper level of our being. First to the spiritual level, which is the level of intuition and the love of God, and then to the true self, which is the manifestation of God in us, in our uniqueness. And finally, the inmost center of our being is the presence of God, the divine indwelling itself. As St. John of the Cross puts it, God is the center of our being. And so centering prayer is that movement to ever deepening levels of being centered in the ultimate presence, which is the center of everything. And in moving to that center, you move to everybody else's center, because that's where they really are at the deepest level. And seeing them at that level means that you experience the oneness that is the significant characteristic of the human species as a whole. The barriers and boundaries, divisions, separations that we set up are all illusory. They're all negative ways of seeing ourselves in reality. And this is part of the healing process, which heals us, first of all, and in so doing is healing everyone else in the human race, because we are so united that whatever we do, everybody else's does. And hence, what we do that is good helps everybody. What we do that is negative and selfish harms everybody. And this negative energy fills the universe around us and causes a certain amount of collective negativity that influences sections of people in ways that are harmful and violent. The love of God overcomes negativity and is far more powerful. So it's this experience that I've outlined very briefly tonight that Jesus called prayer in secret, where, having left behind our external concerns, our interior concerns, we are face to face, mouth to mouth, being to being, with the source of our being, with the ground of our being, with the one who loves us unconditionally, which is true security, true love, and true freedom. The tragedy is that we already are all these things. We just think we aren't. And unfortunately, human beings act out of their belief systems. This sets off the emotional reactions. And when these are strong enough, activities occur. If the reactions are negative, the actions are going to be negative also. So this healing then is so crucial, it might well be called the divine therapy. And the divine therapy is at the same time a friendship and a healing of the wounds, the emotional wounds of a lifetime. It's a long process. And because of the intensity with which we are wedded to the illusion of the false self, it requires a regular practice. In other words, you have to see this psychiatrist every day. You'll be glad to hear it's completely free. Perhaps this is God's one mistake in creation. If he had charged, we might give it a little more respect than we do. But in actual fact, this is an incomparable gift. All the sacraments are reinforcing this movement, but without a personal practice of being silent about your external affairs and your internal evaluations and judgments about them, you don't perceive the difference between the false and the true self. And this is why we feel that centering prayer can be a contribution not just to the renewal of this great tradition of the Christian family, just as available to Protestants as to Roman Catholics, but that it's also an enormous contribution to the healing of the human family as a whole. It makes us more compassionate, less judgmental, more present, more willing to serve, less self-centered in our pursuits, so that everybody, our relatives and friends, benefit from this change, but invisibly we're pouring into the world through prayer that comes from a pure heart, the kind of charity that can change the negativity in an invisible way, perhaps, of our society, which is now plunging at the verge of self-destruction in an age when the technological development of the human mind has vastly outrun the moral consciousness of people as a whole. So somebody would just as soon blow the whole thing up at this point. Who's going to prevent this? We don't even know who this is. God help us if it's ourselves. In any case, it could happen. And what is holding the world together is unconditional love in the hearts of persons who are accessing the contemplative dimension of the gospel and its presence within them. And so it's this project that I invite you to consider supporting with your prayers, and insofar as you can or find that this process is helpful, by some other contribution, including that thing called money. We need the opportunity to provide scholarships for the poor, to provide training for those who can't afford the traveling expenses. We need to reach into communities that are underprivileged, not only in this country, but elsewhere. We have groups in South Africa, that, for instance, where all the groups are black. I visited the Asian community of South Korea, Singapore, and Malaysia, where Asians are particularly ripe for this kind of prayer, especially the Christians who left perhaps a Buddhist or some other one of the Eastern religions to become Christians, but are not finding there the kind of spirituality that was so supportive of them in some ways if they had been practicing a meditative method of discipline. So the market is huge. It's as if an enormous tide symbolizing God's love is flowing into the human race at this time and is inviting all the religions of the world to a dialogue at a deep level of spirituality that would bring to an end the boundaries or the violence that has been a disgrace over the centuries between religious communities. And on that tide, these waves are getting bigger and bigger. And so we're trying to learn how to surf the waves and to choose the big ones that will throw us up on the shore of eternal life as far as you can possibly go, and to begin to change. Not that we do anything, but to allow God to change humanity from a world of utter, or close to it, potentiality for destruction, to one of understanding, concern, and equality of opportunities, especially the opportunity to find God within us, which takes a little education, little leisure, and the support of others seeking the same difficult but incredibly rewarding human experience. We are meant to become divine. That's the given. Not just better human beings, but divine human beings. And this is the project of the Christian religion, and I think of all the others as well. And so, insofar as you might feel moved to help in this regard, we would welcome any assistance we could get. At the same time, the greatest gift that you could give us is to look more deeply into this form of prayer, and if possible, to do it yourself. It is this kind of action, more than any other resource, that will ultimately change the world. Thank you.